Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into what might be the single greatest change in all of human history. It all went down about 12,000 years ago, and honestly, it's the reason for literally everything around you. Your job, the city you live in, even the food you ate for lunch. We are talking about the Neolithic Revolution. No, really, just stop and think about that for a second. How on earth did we go from these small, wandering groups of people who were just focused on their next meal to a global civilization of billions living in these incredibly complex societies? Well, the answer isn't just one thing, but a radical transformation that completely remade our species from the ground up. You have to get this. For 99% of our time on this planet, life looked totally different. We were nomads. Humans lived in small bands, constantly on the move, following the seasons and the animals. And because you couldn't really pile up stuff or store wealth, these societies were pretty egalitarian. It was a lifestyle that worked, and it was stable for hundreds of thousands of years. And then, everything changed.
Okay, so first, let's just set the scene. To really get a handle on this revolution, we have to understand what the world was like before the farm, a world defined by the hunt, not the plow. This was the default setting for humanity for millennia.
This right here, this is our turning point, 10,000 BCE. After all those hundreds of thousands of years of doing things one way, a single, totally revolutionary idea started to catch on. The idea that maybe, just maybe, we could stop chasing our food and for the very first time actually grow it ourselves. And let's be super clear, this wasn't just some new trick, like learning how to make a better spear. No way. This was a complete, top-to-bottom transformation of the human experience. It changed our relationship with the planet, and maybe even more importantly, with each other. Forever. Okay, so let's break it down. The Neolithic Revolution, you'll also hear it called the Agricultural Revolution, is exactly this massive shift. It's the moment we basically traded in our walking sticks for hoes, our temporary camps for permanent villages. We went from being food finders to food makers. So, what kicked it all off? Well, it was kind of a perfect storm of factors. First, the last ice age finally ended. The climate got warmer and wetter, which was perfect for stable plant growth. This allowed human populations to start growing, which, put a lot of pressure on that old hunter-gatherer lifestyle. More mouths to feed meant we needed a much more reliable food source. And the answer was farming. Now, this whole new way of life demanded a whole new toolkit. And I'm not just talking about ideas here. I mean actual, tangible innovations, from new technologies to the very plants and animals that would become our partners in this brand new world. This is, and I'm not exaggerating, humanity's first big experiment in genetic engineering. See, those early farmers didn't just grab any old wild seeds. They were smart. They carefully picked the best ones, the plants with the biggest grains, the toughest stalks, and they replanted those year after year. Over generations, this selective breeding literally transformed wild plants like wheat, rice, and maize into the super reliable, high-yield crops that feed billions of us today. And it wasn't just plants either. Right around the same time, we started domesticating animals. It probably started with useful hunting partners like dogs, but pretty soon we moved on to animals we could use for food, milk, wool, and just plain muscle power. Sheep, goats, and cattle became like living pantries and walking jewel kits, which fundamentally changed our whole ability to produce resources. So, with fields to tend and animals to keep fenced in, humanity kind of had to stop wandering. For the first time in our history, we started building to last, creating the first permanent villages, places like Jericho and Çatalhöyük. This was such a radical change. We were no longer just living on the landscape, we were actively starting to reshape it to fit our needs. But, and this is a huge but, this incredible leap forward came at a cost. The agricultural revolution was a massive trade-off. It solved some of our oldest problems, for sure, but it also created a whole new set of problems, ones we are absolutely still dealing with today. Okay, check this out, because this is the core of it. The huge gain. For the first time ever, we could create a food surplus, way more food than we needed just to survive day to day. But the cost was enormous. As soon as you have a surplus, you have wealth, and wealth has to be protected. This led directly to land ownership, to class divisions, to social hierarchies. The very idea of inequality, it was born right here. Here's another one of those trade-offs. All that extra food allowed villages to explode in size and become the very first cities. Awesome, right? But the cost?
Well, when you pack thousands of people together, living right next to their domesticated animals, you create the perfect breeding ground for new infectious diseases to pop up and spread like wildfire. In a way, civilization and sickness really grew up together.
And one more. While this newfound stability gave us the time and resources for incredible cultural growth, things like specialized crafts, writing, organized religion, it also totally upended social structures. In a lot of these new farming societies, the type of labor changed, and it often pushed women into more domestic roles, chipping away at the more equal status they often had in hunter-gatherer groups. So what's the big takeaway? Why does all this matter to us? Well, the consequences of this ancient revolution aren't just history. They are the invisible architecture of our modern world. They are the foundation that everything we know is built on.
And what's just mind-blowing is that this wasn't some one-time fluke in one part of the world. Nope. This powerful idea of farming popped up independently all over the planet. In the Fertile Crescent, it was wheat. In China, farmers figured out rice. In Mesoamerica, it was all about maize and beans. And up in the Andes, potatoes. It's like once the conditions were right, farming was just an idea whose time had come. Again and again and again.
This quote here really just nails it. This shift from hunting and gathering to farming, it's not just another important historical event. You could argue it is the event that made all the other ones possible. It's basically the starting pistol for everything we call civilization. I mean, really let that sink in. Without that first farmer who decided to plant a seed instead of just eating it, there's no food surplus. Without a surplus, you can't have specialized jobs. No artisans, no soldiers, no priests, no kings. Without those, you get no cities, no states, no empires. The entire, complicated, sprawling world we live in today traces its roots directly back to that single, world-shattering decision.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating and kind of heavy question to think about. The Neolithic Revolution gave us cities and art and science. It also gave us inequality, widespread disease, and environmental destruction. It created our world with all of its incredible triumphs and all of its deep-seated troubles. So, looking back at all of it, was it worth it?